Hello and welcome to episode 47 of Webflail. Today I am joined by Fungi. She is a brand designer on the Flux Academy team, so you might have seen her there. But if you haven't heard of her, she has a fascinating story. She comes from a science background with a Bachelor of Science in Human Anatomy and Physiology and Biochemistry. Whew, that's a mouthful. She then started becoming interested in design after seeing a Photoshop tutorial and then went down the rabbit hole of design to learn different softwares and grow as a brand identity designer and now webflower. She found her brand voice and design style when she tied in her background from Harare in Zimbabwe. Her work is heavily influenced by Afrikan culture, patterns, historic writings, graphic symbols, and color as a form of visual and global communication. We'll dig into this during the episode. Fungi then found the power of Webflow and has since added this skill set to her repertoire. Go check out her website. It's so cool. It absolutely went viral on Twitter. So you may have seen it already, but go check it out. It's in the comments below if you're listening on Spotify. The failures that we'll talk about today are first ever Webflow dev site, having proper internal systems, and getting a steady flow of work. Fungi, welcome to Webflow.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome to have you too. And it's really interesting to have international guests from all around the world. And I'm really interested in your design style because I think one thing that Webflowers, when they're starting out, they struggle to actually kind of know what their visual voice is, as it were, like their kind of brand voice. And
hmm
you seem to have a very clear idea of that from the get-go, which I think is fascinating. So can you tell me a little bit about how your backgrounds influence your design style and why you think it's important to express that?
so I guess I'll start off by saying that I haven't always known what my style was going to be. It was very experimental in the formative years of learning design. So I kind of did everything. And a lot of what I did was influenced by what I saw on social media, especially on Instagram. So trying to either sort of uh, copy other designers' styles, not copy in the worst sense of the word, but just trying to get a handle of how I can express my work in different ways. And I found that as I was doing this, it was okay for the time, but I just didn't feel as connected to the work. And it felt quite unfamiliar to me and quite foreign as well. So I sort of started digging a little bit deeper and doing some like personal reflection and that sort of thing, and just trying to figure out exactly how I wanted to represent my work, and more so how I would want for the world to also engage with my work. So that's how I sort of started um, shifting from like a more generic style to something that was very specific to my surroundings, to my culture, to my heritage, to things that I'm exposed to, and to things that other people who look like me are also exposed to. And it was like really scary initially, because I was like, whoa, I'm not entirely sure like how the internet is going to receive this. And given that, especially at that time when it came to like the brand design space, there weren't really a lot of expressions that were like the way that I design now. I'm happy that there are more that are coming out, which is really inspiring and encouraging. So I sort of just went for it. I worked on something that was a personal passion project that was based on a coffee packaging design that really highlights the beauty of some of the African regions that grow coffee. And I put it on LinkedIn. I was like, whoa, I have no idea what's going to happen with this, but it's out there in the world. Let's see what happens. So I'm really grateful because that was sort of like the moment that really solidified everything for me. I did not expect the reaction that I got to the work, but it was overwhelmingly positive, and everyone was like super excited. And I was like, oh, okay, so there's something here for sure. So I guess going into it and over the years, it's something that I really just worked on and like really refined. And it was much easier now, like switching to Webflow, because I knew that I wanted to sort of carry that extension into the web design space as well. So as much as there are more culturally inclined expressions coming from me in brand design, I wanted to switch that over and be like, Webflow is a really cool platform. No code is the future right now. Everyone's on it, but can we get like something a little bit more different? Can I build like different kind of websites and that sort of thing? So that's how I was thinking about it, just to sort of extend my range, but within the same style that I've worked on for years now.
Wow, what a beautiful answer. So essentially, you wanted to kind of have more representation through your design work. And obviously, that's been so influenced by your culture. And this coffee packaging, I think it's really interesting because a lot of brands will kind of have like I don't know, a kind of like a pastiche version of some kind of cultural reference, where it's like, oh, this is from Italy, so we'll just, I don't know, have like like the colors or something, but they're not really, they don't truly understand the cultural identity of that place, and they've kind of, I don't know, made like a kind of a cleaner, like palatized version of it, if that's the right word.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you
Mm-hmm.
obviously know the regions where this coffee comes from. And I've listened to other interviews where you will go to museums and talk to basket weavers who have been doing this for 40 years, for example, and you are trying to like very actively engage with where you are and bring that into your design, which I think such a fascinating way of um, kind of making sure that there is true representation, not just a version of it. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that completely. Because the thing also when it comes to culturally inclined work is that you don't want to misinterpret anything and you don't want to misconstrue anything. So, in my context, as much as I'm African, I am Zimbabwean. So, that means that a lot of what happens in other African countries is something that I may not be familiar with, even though we do share common threads when it comes to some of the practices that we have. So, if I need to dig a little bit deeper to ensure that I have the right facts, then I'm definitely going to do that. I'm going to see who I can have a chat with online. The beauty of the internet is that it connects us all. So I can quickly hop on my Instagram and be like, oh, there's a designer from Senegal and I'm working on this. Could you verify this word for me? Is this a cultural practice that you're familiar with? Things like that, just to make sure that I do get to tell the story, but I tell the story in the right way. So it definitely goes like layers deep just to ensure that we get like the right information. And then I convey the translate the information in my style so that it's become something that is still quite fresh, still quite modern, but has a lot of like significance behind it.
And it seems that you've got a very scientific approach to design in a way that most designers I've talked to simply just do not go into the depth to find like the origin of where this has actually come from before maybe using it in design, or talking to people that are involved with that cultural practice. So do you think your background in science has actually made you quite a different designer and web flower? Like, you're approaching things in a very scientific manner. Would you agree with that?
I would like to think so. I feel like there's definitely a lot that I draw from my academic background. I don't know if my parents see you that way now, but that's a conversation for another day. No, they're very supportive.
Oh
They're
no, this
lovely.
is a different
They-
Webflail episode.
no, they're very lovely and very supportive. But yes, I do find that I tend to gravitate towards digging a little bit deeper more naturally because of that. So I guess because everything was super like research based and you had to go through tons and tons of papers and that sort of thing. So even when it comes to my day-to-day work and even when I do like client commissions and everything like that, if I need to pull out a paper, I'll read it. I'll read through like 20 pages of stuff or like 40 pages of like 3 different research papers just to make sure that I get something. And more so, I think given the fact that when it comes to culturally inclined like inspiration, and again, as we've been talking about, like finding the right information, like you're definitely going to have to go to greater heights or adopt like more unconventional methods to make sure that you get the right information. So if anything, my research, my design process is like 90 80 90% research, and then like you get the odd 10 or 20 executing everything. But yeah, my scientific background like definitely like helps me to like dig deep and like question things and be like, okay, so if I put this here and this here, I'm supposed to get this result. But if that's not working, then what do I need to fix? Like, do I need to bring in something else? Do I need to take something out? So I really like dissect everything and like piece things together to make sure that I get the best outcome.
And how does this kind of meticulous approach to design and then I guess development, how does that link with clients? Because I think sometimes there's a little bit of a tension between client needs just being like, listen, we've got a deadline, we're super busy. We just need you to make something that, here's the information. And but they might not necessarily understand the depth to your process to actually get the results that you do get sometimes. And
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about how this fits with the client process.
Yeah, so this is a super valid question because I think that initially I sort of was that kind of designer where I'm like, whatever comes my way and whatever it is that they want, like we're just gonna work through it and get it done. And I think that we all go through that as designers at some point because especially when you're starting out or if you're independent, you have to make sure that you have a bit of a cushion, right? So the work may not necessarily be work that moves you or inspires you and may actually like be very difficult to get through it. But you know that you're getting paid for it. So, if anything, um, 8 years later in design and like maybe 2.5 years in Webflow, I am grateful because I have the privilege of choice where it comes to sort of a stage where when clients do approach me, they approach me specifically because of my process and my style. So when it then comes to how we work together, there's a mutual understanding that, this is something that's going to be very intentional. We're really going to work through this and we're going to ensure that we get this kind of result and it comes from this kind of process. So given that someone doesn't necessarily agree with me or they may have like like strict deadlines or something like that, then only now am I in a position to maybe sort of assess the situation and be like, okay, I understand where you're coming from and you need to get this done, but I may not be the right designer for you. Whereas initially that would not have been the conversation that we'll be having of okay, what do you need? Let's do it. Okay, so you want it tomorrow? No problem. I am not gonna sleep. I'm gonna get it done. I'll get it to you tomorrow. um, but I guess that's what comes with growth and like really taking your time out to make sure that you build something that's sustainable and you work with the kind of people that you want to work with.
I love the transparency in that answer. So what you're saying is that at the start, you're not too sure what your creative voice is. You're maybe trying to even just work out what your processes are, the type of people that you're working with, whether you enjoy working with this type of project, whatever. But you're taking on a lot of different projects and you're kind of at the behest of the client to a certain extent. You're kind of like, okay, well, you want this landing page designed by next week? Okay, I'm not going to be able to do the kind of processes that you seem to really enjoy doing, the kind of maybe slower but more intentional design work, to understand the background and talk to people and really go in depth. But now you've got a little bit of leverage in the design space and people are like coming to you specifically for that type of work, and that's the type of work you enjoy. Now when clients come to you and say, we need a landing page designed and built by next week, you're like, hey, appreciate that's where you're coming from, but I'm not the best person for the job. let me direct you to someone else. Is that the type of
Ex-
conversation that you're now having?
exactly. Because I mean, you know what the thing is, I feel like, especially when it comes to like branding or like web work, it's an investment on the client's part. They're paying a lot of money for that kind of service. So I would be doing myself a disservice and I would be putting my reputation on the line as well if I just take it because hey, it's a good amount of money that they're gonna pay me knowing fully well that I'm not the right person for it. So whenever I have discovery calls with my clients, I'm very transparent with them. I listen to what the objectives are and what their needs are, and I'll sort of, like ask them leading questions so that I can also really understand how best I can help them. So if I sort of unpack what they're trying to do and in the process I discover that I'm not the right creative for them, I'll let them know. I'm like, listen, this is your money. You want to make sure that it goes to the best person. So based off of what you're saying, these are my core specializations and what I can offer you. When it comes to the other things, I will not be able to do this. So at least you're in an informed position and you can make a better decision as to how to invest your money. So those are definitely conversations that we're having for sure.
I absolutely love that answer. Not everyone is in a position to do that. It's worth pointing out that you need to have enough client work coming in order to actually do that. Like, and that
Yeah.
kind of inbound lead pipeline takes a little bit of time to develop. But when you do get to a place where you can say, look, I don't think I'm the best person for this job. I don't know about you, but I've said to people, I'm not the best person for this job. And the people, like clients or potential clients, are like, oh my God, thank you for saying that. Like, it's actually
Mm,
really nice for someone to say, look, I'm not right for you. I'm not going to take your money. I am going to find you someone who will be best to help you, who I trust.
mhm.
And when you do that to someone, it feels like you're guiding, the client or the potential client, sorry, feels like they're being guided. And that has a boomerang effect down the line. Like, they're going to come to you and say, hey, we now know that you are the best person for this job, and we want to hire you because we trust you when there was no money at stake. Like, now we know that you're not just in it for money, and you are actually the best person for the job because you've specifically said, this is what I'm good at. I'm not sure if that has happened to you, but I think there's a real trust element that comes from when you say that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you like 150% because I've had clients who have come back to me and said those kinds of things to be like, oh no, we're very sure of what it is that you do and how you do it. So yeah, like let's work together. So yeah, it definitely has a ripple effect down the line. And I think just leading with integrity goes a long way because then, you've built a credible and like reputable brand and people want to work with you because they know that they're gonna get full transparency out of it.
Yeah, your reputation precedes you. They know people want to work with who they like, know, and trust. That's not me.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
Marty Neumeier. I think I heard that quote from, and it's a beautiful quote. It's really important to remember this is a relationship business, and being likable by getting trust from people is a big part of this. So kudos to you for doing that and saying, look, I know my process, I know how I can help you best, and it doesn't seem like we're aligned at the moment. You need something out the door quickly. That is your top priority. That is not where I'm going to be providing you the best value. So I
Yeah.
recommend you going with someone else. I think that's such a great skill set to recognize in yourself. And something that I want to ask you as well is a lot of different people that use Webflow are obviously based all around the world. People are trying to get clients from everywhere, and it seems like your approach would only mean that clients would be interested like locally to you because you're focusing on like super local to your heritage, design, voice, etc. But I overheard you in an interview with Rand say, actually, it's the opposite because I've focused in really tightly on having a brand voice that represents African culture, people all around are like, hey, now I know the designer for the project that I'm trying to work on, because I want an expert who can guide me through that design process and give me that design style. Can you tell me a little bit about that, and maybe how that's affected you as a designer that's getting clients?
So I think initially, like when I was coming up with my personal strategy, this is something that I was thinking about to say, do I want to spread my work across different kinds of cultures and disciplines, or do I want to really zero in on something? And I chose what others may consider to be the less traveled path, I guess. Where I'm like, you know what, I want to ensure that at least like I feel fully represented in what I'm doing, and anyone who sort of engages with my work, regardless of where they come from, can really, really see that it comes from this really special place in my heart. So it really does limit my options, so I'm not going to lie about that, because I'm sure that there are other generalists who get a ton more work than I do. But I'm perfectly happy with that, because I know that when I do get the work that I get, it's work that resonates with me. But what I'm actually realizing is that, and maybe it could be in hindsight, but I see it more and more now, is that choosing to really follow my path was something that has done so much good for me, in the sense that there is still a wider like African diaspora market who are still trying to express their ideas and get their products out there. There are also still organizations and that are working on the continent who also require for a certain amount of work to be done. They are existing designers or creatives or type foundries, just as we're talking about with Rand, that are also creating content that is more inclusive, because that's also something that I'm grateful is happening now. So as much as people may consider the Western market, they'll also see how that also looks for the African market and that sort of thing. So it all sort of comes together where there isn't like just one kind of client that I'm working with, but there are several different kinds of clients who are still creating inclusive content, who are still wanting to market to the wider African diaspora market, who are still working here within sub-Saharan Africa and trying to make a change and that sort of thing. So there's a whole bunch of things that are happening on the continent itself and outside, but for the continent and outside for the continent, you know. So it's a whole bunch of things that are happening in this kind of space. So yeah, it's I don't know. I think I feel like it's a good time to be where I'm at right now. And the one thing that I really wanted to make sure of, and I don't know if this is something that like where I was like highly ambitious or whatever the case is, but I told myself, and I still tell myself, that every single day when I wake up and create, regardless of who it is who engages my work, wherever they are, I want for my name to be the first name that they think of when they're like African design or culturally inclined design, or who can I go to for this kind of brand design or this kind of Webflow work. I want for my name to be the first name that people think of.
Damn, I feel like we've just had a TED talk right there. um I mean, that was I'm inspired. I think if you have a clear objective as to how people, um, the kind of things that you want associated with your name, then you're far more likely to eventually achieve that. And I think you're well on the way, if I may say that, because you have a very clear idea of who you are and who you want to be, and that is reflected in your in everything that I've seen online from you. So you're well on the way.
Thank you.
One thing I would say though is that before we talk too much about the future, I want to reflect back on your failures that have helped carve out this path for you. We need to talk about these. So tell me about failure number one, your first Webflow dev project being your portfolio site. Tell me about that.
Okay. So what's actually interesting about this entire workflow journey is that I think that I should have started it probably like 9 months prior to when I actually decided to start it. So without going into too much detail, I did have an opportunity where I could have learned Webflow and I couldn't take it up because there were so many things that were happening in my personal life at the time. So I just wasn't in the right headspace. And then fast forward to 9 months later, I was like, wait, actually, I keep seeing more and more people talking about Webflow, like on Twitter and like what's happening with this. And, like I just really wanted to get down to the bottom of it. So I was thinking to myself, and it was, one of those like late night conversations when you're just sitting and lying in bed actually. And I was like, wait, but I have no web design experience. I mean, do I need to learn like Figma? Like, do I need to design things there and then like move them over to Webflow? Like, I was just having so many internal conversations. So I was like, all you know is like brand and Illustrator, Fungi. So how are you going to tackle this? But I just went to bed and I woke up with such a strong determination in my heart where I was like, you know what? Let's turn this into an experiment. And I guess this is also the science part of me that was kicking in to be like, let's see what happens, right? So if I take time out to actually learn this thing and I use myself as the guinea pig to see how it goes, maybe it could be the thing that really propels me to work on other people's websites. So I started the journey, and my goodness, like I have never been so lost and so confused in my life. I was like, what is going on here? And then I need to put what? I need to get a section and like put a div block and then like put something inside there. Like I need to put a container within a container to contain things. And it was a lot. So that's when I was like, you know what? I think that I need to approach this a little bit more in a structured way. So I was learning through like Webflow University, and then I started also pulling some resources from YouTube. So just tutorials on how to um, get certain interactions working, but whilst also researching, because I'll research interactions on other people's sites or like in the workflow community and that sort of thing to be like, okay, I think that this could work for what I'm trying to do and that sort of thing. But even within that, because it was like 3 months from learning to actually sort of launching my website, I can safely tell you that I barely slept because I was in and out. Like people were like, hey, like, do you want to hang out? Do you want to do this? I was like, guys, I'm on a mission. Like I need to learn how to do this thing and I've got to get it right. And even within that, I ended up having to strip down like certain pages of my website and rebuild them a few times around because I was like, oh, this is so cool. And this is such like a really cool layout. And I was like, wait, this is not going to be responsive like at all. So it may look great now, but it's not going to look great on other breakpoints. So that was humbling, to say the least. Um, but when it did come to the time, like when I felt like I was ready to launch, I was shaking. I was nervous. I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't have as much experience as everyone like who's like currently doing Webflow and that sort of thing. And everything just looks like really amazing and like well put together. And this is me just coming out with my own expression, and I hope that it works. So I just kind of put it out there on the internet. I was like, okay. I can't believe that this is actually happening, but here's my website. And along the way, like I would update like my Twitter and be like, I figured out what my hero section is gonna look like today. It took me like X amount of time, but I think it looks pretty cool. And you get like so much support from like the online community being like, oh, this is so cool. Like you're learning in public and like we keep seeing like your mistakes and how you're fixing things and how you're figuring out things. Especially given the fact that you're coming from a non-web design background. So that again was like another pivotal moment, I guess, in my design career where I was not expecting the reaction that I got. Because I felt very proud of the body of work that I had put out, but I didn't realize that everyone else was going to be just as excited about it as I was. So just sort of seeing like the number of people who are in my DM, like on Twitter and Instagram, and people who commented under my website, and people who still message me to this day and still talk about how they feel inspired when they go through my website and how I built it, like just it keeps me going. It keeps me going. So I get more and more and more excited to keep learning, to keep getting better at it, and to see what more I can do with it. But really, I'm glad that the experiment paid off. But it was, yeah, it was very chaotic just trying to get through everything for sure.
So I mean, from a failure perspective, I guess you felt like you were just diving in head first, tumbling down a chasm of containers and sections and divs and interactions, and just being like, what the hell am I doing? But then it all came good after 3 months of just on being on a mission, saying, look, I can't chat right now.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do
yeah.
this thing. And
I'm
then
gonna do
it
this
came good.
thing. Yeah,
And I
and
think it's
it's even
another
like,
thing that's, sorry, you go.
oh no, no, sorry, go
Well, I
ahead.
was just going to ask, it's interesting that you basically shared as you were going through the process very publicly, saying like, I'm trying to build my portfolio, I'm struggling here. And like, it sounds like the building the portfolio in public really gave you momentum when you actually launched the website for the support that you got. I mean, I'm on Twitter right now. Your website, I have never seen someone launch a portfolio with so much success online. It is insane. It's 1,871 likes, 647 retweets, 229 comments. And that's just on Twitter. I mean, imagine on LinkedIn and stuff, you probably got similar feedback. So that's such an interesting way to launch, in my opinion. You're sharing what you're doing as you're you're building in public, and then the public affection that you got is just insane.
Yeah, I agree. It was a little bit crazy too. I couldn't
You
believe
must have
it.
woken up and been like, what the hell has happened? Like, that is crazy.
No, it was so bizarre, and especially like for a platform like Twitter, like when it comes to like general acknowledgement and engagement, I I do like speak with designers from, different parts of the world and that sort of thing, and we exchange content and ideas, but nothing of this sort had ever happened to any of the posts that I had put up. So it was designers from everywhere. Um, and I had designers from everywhere in my DM. And I even got like a few job offers through that as well. And I was like, this is bizarre. Like it's absolutely bizarre. But I do think that building in public definitely helped me for sure to feel more confident in getting it wrong. In the sense that I would have an idea, I would put it forward, and then you know how it is like with creative work. You speak, you wake up, you're like, wait a minute, that's really not gonna work. But then you would also probably have someone who'd be like, what if like you sort of do this and do that to make sure that this technically is better and that sort of thing. So it really, 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 I guess would say helped me to gain confidence in not having it be perfect as I was going along. But obviously, when it came to launching, I was like, no, this has to be like the best thing that I've done. And I'm glad that it turned out that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if there was any advice that you would have given to yourself, when you were starting out with Webflow, or anyone that's maybe thinking about launching a portfolio, but is like, I don't know how to do it. I'm procrastinating. I don't really know what to do. What advice would you give them?
So I think I would say like to have a structured plan, because when I was sort of going through it, I was like, oh man, like I can figure it out. Like I'm a designer, like I know the fundamentals of design. Like let's just get into it and like I can figure it out as I go. So surely if I play something here and do that, like then it's gonna work the way that it's supposed to. But that is definitely not how it is, because there is a steeper learning curve, I would say. So structure your learning in a way that allows for you to get like maximum benefit out of it. So really do go through the tutorials, make sure you understand the fundamentals of what it takes to design and no code, like understand CMS, understand CSS, things like that. Not to like a deeper level, but just so that you know exactly how to contain things and how to structure things so that you have something that's quite beautiful at the end of it. So don't rush the process, like make sure that you really structure your learning and just yeah, stay at it is what I would say. It'll get a little bit confusing and a little bit frustrating down the line, but the results are always worth it for sure.
Okay, great. So a few nuggets there. You can't just jump into Webflow and just freestyle your portfolio, guys. You do need to think a little bit
No,
about, because breakpoints and all of that stuff is going to be very, very hard to just jump straight into Webflow if you haven't had any experience with Webflow previously. So if you're doing that, maybe
oh
just have a little. Sorry, you go.
no, I was gonna say all with web design in general. So not just Webflow, but like just web design in general. Because I was coming purely from a brand design background.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the type of approach that you might come up with a brand identity where it's like, okay, let's do some research, have a play kind of, in Illustrator, you might be um, just kind of exploring shapes and stuff. I think if you apply
Hmm.
that same mentality to Webflow, it's very quickly going to get messy. So the type of mindset that I think you need as a designer and a developer is very different. I've found. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not a developer. I'm very not a developer, and the type of mindset that you need for complicated projects, you need a very different type of mind. I found, or a very different type of approach. So be warned, but also that if you stick at it, just like Fungi did, and put your head down, then amazing things can happen, just like the reception you've received on Twitter and LinkedIn. The other important pull out or thing to highlight from that as well is that share your work. If people can see that you're trying to push a car along a road, they're far more likely to help. But if they don't know you're trying to push a car along the road, then they won't help you. They won't know that help is needed. And
Yeah.
where am I going with this strange metaphor? What I'm trying to say is that, if you're struggling to do stuff, tell people about it. Maybe screenshot the problem that you're having and ask the Twitter community, or, message a designer that might be able to help and just say, hey, I saw that you've done this on another website. Can I just ask you how you approach this problem? Because people in the Webflow community are very friendly, I found, and
Yeah.
are well
Yeah.
up for supporting. Okay.
I agree with you 100%.
Awesome. I am relieved. It would be so awkward if you were like, I completely disagree, Jack. That is awful advice for anyone that's listening. Um, Fungi, tell me about failure number 2, not having proper internal systems. Maybe this is very interlinked with the first point.
So I guess now also being full-time independent brand and Webflow Gertie, I I call myself. Um, there was a point where I lost clients that I shouldn't have lost. Because I just didn't have proper systems in place. And what I mean by that is that you sort of kind of coast through things, like you don't have like proper contractual agreements, like you have poor judge of character, things like that, and things just end up going sideways. So experiences like that, obviously, and these experiences cost you money too, right? So because I've had instances where I've ended up having to send back deposits for projects because we're just butting heads and things are not working, and you know, um, it's just not an ideal setup. So with time, that teaches you that even as you are taking on these clients and these projects, you need to ensure that you have proper documentation in place. Like, what are your working terms? Like, are those being observed? Are you protecting your interests as a designer and your client's interests as well? Like, how are you onboarding them? Like, how are you communicating with them? Like, how are you delivering like key milestones and everything like that? So I had to learn this on the go, and you learn it as after you've taken a hit, like, or several hits where you're like, oh, you know what? I need to get my act together because this is just not working out the way that it's supposed to work. And it also is kind of scary because you're like, if this is the experience that I have given this client, what are they going to say to the next person? And how is that going to, like affect like the next couple of people who are going to work with me based off of what they would have heard, or, what the chitter chatter is in the streets, or whatever the case may be. So really had to tighten up ship and be like, there's a reformation that needs to happen, some form of reinvention, some form of resurrection of sorts, I guess you can even call it that, just to ensure that like my name is not tainted, my brand is not tainted, and I really am working towards getting better and making sure that the experience that one person has is the same experience that the next 20 people are going to have. So yeah, that was a lot of trial and error, a lot of disappointment, a lot of loss. But I'm grateful that I'm here now. Um, you could say maybe I wouldn't be here without it, but I think there are some things that can definitely be avoided if we just do things right from the start. So yeah.
I mean, I definitely say your clients now are probably far better off for the experiences that you had when you didn't have systems and processes. Because now,
Mm.
I bet it's a smooth service. So so it's great that you learn what you did learn. But I think a lot of the stuff you said there, I mean, it's as much as it's about systems and processes, it's also just working out where your boundaries lie, right? Like
Mhm.
it's not it, sometimes, yes, there's just basic things that you need to do, like don't go quiet on your client, like keep updating them so that they feel like you are moving the project along and that they feel secure. That's a kind of basic thing that is very helpful to do. But then some things aren't as obvious as that, like where do your boundaries lie? Like, if the client has already done um multiple scope revisions, at what point do you say enough is enough? Like, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
do that for you. And there's things that, yeah, write down your process, and there's basic things that you can do, but there's also things that you need to work out by trial and error. And it's not like there's a hard and fast rule necessarily on some things. So um yeah, I'd push back on you saying I could have avoided that. There's some things that I honestly think it's about you working out who you are and where your boundaries lie so that you can actually guide your clients properly. I would say maybe.
Mm, And I think that's actually like a really profound like point to make, because we tend to overstretch ourselves like way past like the value of the project, and you find yourself in the space where it's just it's not ideal.
Oh,
Your
and
peace
you're
of
like,
mind
wait, I'm
is
working to
gone.
minus. Ah, hey, I've
Yeah,
been there.
yeah,
You're like, I might as well go and just work in a cafe because at least I know I'm going to get £7.50 an hour.
yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, the client's always right, and you've got this strange mentality where it's like, I'm going to bend over backwards for them, but then they start
Mm,
treading all over
mm.
you, and it's like, can you add this? Can you add this? And you're like, wait, I probably should have set my boundaries way earlier, but it's too late now. I don't know.
Exactly,
Sorry, I'm going
exactly.
on a bit of a rant here, but this is, problems that I've faced, and it's been a bit strange because you're like, wait, I want to keep this client because they said they pay me on retainer, but this is like out of scope now. And yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
going on a rant here.
No. No, no, don't even apologize, because I feel like your rant is very valid. And trying to take back control of a project like that is also something that is
Yeah.
just so difficult to
Oh,
do. It's very
yeah,
difficult to
yeah,
do. And you can't like ask for more money because you've worked way over the scope and you just have to finish it, but you're
yep.
also
You
not
just got
in
to get it
control of
done.
anything. So you're just like, you know what, let me complete this with grace, and hopefully this will not happen the next time. So yeah.
Exactly, and use it as the most expensive lesson you you've ever had, maybe. But
Mm,
I would say one way that I think isn't actually talked about enough in the Webflow space is going to work for an agency, a successful agency, because a successful agency that's been around for a little while has their systems and processes down, right?
mhm,
They've taken the hits that you as a
mhm,
freelancer may well start to take. And if you go and work for an agency who have their systems and processes down, not only can you work with people that are better than you and just learn from them, but also see how what systems are they using ClickUp? Are they using Trello? How do they communicate
mm,
with the client? Like, what is their what does a project manager do in the agency that maybe you can learn from? Because as a freelancer,
exactly.
you're like a fucking octopus. You've got to work out
Yeah.
accountancy, project management. You're actually the designer and developer. And then there's the handoff process. So you're trying to make tutorial videos and like there's a lot. And when you're starting out, I think it is quite healthy to go and work for an agency. And I don't think that's the coolest thing to say, because a lot of people get into Webflow because they want to be digital nomads and go and work from the beach and stuff. But in reality, you gotta, I feel like it's an underrated fast track ticket to doing that, to go and work for an agency that is successful. And the reason why I use the word
Mhm,
successful is because there are a lot of Webflow agencies that are very young, very new, and aren't necessarily they don't necessarily have the best systems and processes down. And what you might
mhm.
do is you might go and work for people that maybe don't actually have these things together, and you're not necessarily learning as much as you could if you went to a more established agency. So yeah, sorry, I kind of just stole the mic there, but this is something that I've been considering a lot recently.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you. I feel like if people do have the access to work in an agency that's reputable and has their systems in place, then definitely go for that. I guess for some of us who are independent from the start and just sort of getting into it, I would definitely encourage for you to invest time in researching what others are doing, how others go about their process, what industry standards are. And like you rightfully mentioned, like the nice thing about it is that all of these like platforms are all online and we're all on the internet. So if it's, using Notion for your project management, if it's looking into other resources that allow for you to have a faster build, where you can get icons, things like that, whatever the case is, right? And again, I know that I'm going more into sort of like the design dev side, but just sort of check out and see what's happening, and see how you can adopt that for your own model, however that looks, and just go with it and make sure that you put your best foot forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the times, the unsexy stuff like project management and systems and processes um, gives you the chance to do the sexy stuff, like working on the projects that you actually want to do with clients and making them happy, right?
Agreed.
But yeah, if anyone's like, no, I want to just do animations, and that's why I'm interested in Webflow and stuff, which was totally me, by the way. So if anyone's like, who are you to tell this, Jack? This is me. In fact, this is me right now. I've been putting on systems and processes for a while, and this is my kick up the backside to sort my life out. Okay, tell me about failure number 3, your personal strategy to get a steady flow of work.
Okay, so I feel like this is not a conversation. I don't know if this conversation has had enough, actually. Let me start out by saying that. To say that there's a lot of anxiety that comes with being an independent designer, because you may not necessarily be sure when your next paycheck is gonna come. And more so when you're starting out because you have to like build a brand and like there are all these strategies like you need to make sure that you do this, you need to post 5 times to Instagram and you know create 4 carousels and 25 Instagram reels and all sorts of things, and it's completely overwhelming because on top of like the internet dictating that you have to do the things in order for people to see your work, you're also trying to fight your own battles, like where you're like, what am I going to do? What's going to happen with this? I need to make sure that I can afford this. I need to make sure that I can take care of myself. I need to make sure that my design revenue is enough for me to actually live life, and live it to the fullest. So I think when it came to that, and you'll find that throughout my design career, like I haven't switched personas, I would say, but I guess I could say that. But the way that I maybe presented my work initially in the beginning is very different to how I did it in the middle, and it's very different to how I do it now. And that again was through trial and error to see what sticks, what doesn't. So it came from a place where it was very chaotic, very experimental. Anyone could just see it and be like, oh, maybe we're not really sure what she does, but I think she does a little bit of everything. So maybe I could just ask her to do this. But I wouldn't get a lot of people would come to me and ask me for that because it would be like the smaller odd things, right? So it could have been like a random flyer for your pug who is so cute and is turning like 5 years old, and I would do it. But it's not really something that's going to pay you money that's going to sustain your life, if that makes sense. So I had to ensure that I really took time out to invest in reading material that would help me to self market and self promote my work without also being super invasive and, in people's faces because no one likes being sold to. And also ensuring that the places that I showed up online and how I showed up and how I spoke about my work and that sort of thing would be something that would appeal to a certain audience that I was trying to draw in. So I did something super drastic where I had to strip down my online personality completely, especially given the fact that I would tweet about, very random things that were okay things to tweet about. Like we can talk about football, we can talk about, I don't know, food or fashion or whatever, just general life things. But there's absolutely no way that would have appealed to my target audience because they don't see me talking enough about my design work and why it's important to me and how I go about it. And also, I have no base at all because I'm coming from like the science background. I was working a non-design related job, and if I just sort of started talking about design from nowhere, people are going to be like, "Why do we need to listen to you? Who are you? What credentials do you have?" Right? So it took a lot of, like I'm saying, of stripping down, of really like getting to the bare ground, and then building up from there and experimenting to see uh, what kind of content would hit more, what would not hit more, where do I find my target audience, how do I appeal to the emotions and to their pockets, because that's essential. And and that sort of thing. So that was I would like to say that process probably took me about a year and a half of just trying to figure things out, and once I got the right formula, then I just kind of ran with it.
What's the formula? Tell us.
Um, See, the formula is very subjective. I don't think that there's one thing that works for all of us. So I think just once you know really who your people are, then you've got to figure out how to get them in your corner. So I find that there's a lot of value in community. I find that there's a lot of value in exchange of ideas. I also find that there's a lot of value in also sharing authentic experiences when it comes to the journey and how to go about things. So even podcasts like this and what you're doing is incredible because having people talk about, things that they've done, things where they failed, things where they could have been better and that sort of thing also helps because it feels more human, right? It's not very robotic or very AI because that's the wave now, but it's genuine experiences that I believe that someone who's in year one of design would be like, oh gosh, that's happening to me right now. and that sort of thing. So you relate on that level as well. So it also has a lot to do, obviously, with the quality of work that you're going to put out and that sort of thing, because that's also a big factor to say, if someone sees my work, are they going to immediately think that, oh, okay, when I see Jack's work or when I see Fungi's work, I'm likely to pay X amount of money just based off of how it looks. And I think that's important too. But I mean, that comes with years of like just practicing and making sure that your technical abilities like get to that level and you keep learning, because we never stop. We're students of life when it comes to design. So, oh, students for life. But yeah, that I'm not sure if that really answers the question. It still
It
feels a little
does.
bit vague
It
when I put it
completely
across, but
it completely answers the question because there is no secret formula. I think that is there's everyone's, trying to sell a course on the silver bullet to getting a, 5K regular months and whatever else. And I think that the truth is that you need to work out what your formula is by trial and error. And
yeah.
Jamie Dowis, I interviewed this woman called Jamie Dowis, and she never posts on Twitter. She's not active on social media. She actually gets
Mm-hmm.
her clients from Fiverr because that's, how she started. She's built a reputation there, and her agency is not one that you will have heard of, but her agency is
Mm-hmm.
doing very well. Um, on the other hand, there are people that are having a big kind of public profile, like Brett from Design Joy. I think he's a really interesting example of someone that is very active on social media, talking very candidly about money, and the client work that he's doing, and he's got an audience there, and now he's doing his course, and that's a whole separate
Mm-hmm.
thing. But I just think it's important to say that yeah, this whole secret formula of how to get clients and how to market yourself is very subjective to the type of personality you have, where you even enjoy hanging out. Like if you enjoy hanging out on Twitter, then likely it is your people are on Twitter, like the people that you like to work
Mm-hmm.
with, like to talk to. And I think that maybe is quite a good indicator. Um, but yeah, meeting the type of clients that you want, where they are, I think is kind of the crux of what you're saying. And that takes time to work out in itself, so that's why you talked about, making cards for someone who's got a new dog, like a pug and stuff. Like you're doing all sorts of different projects to work out, well, what are the types of clients and projects that you even enjoy working on, and from there you
Mm-hmm.
can then work out where your audience is and then how to talk to them.
Yeah. I think you summarized that pretty well. That's exactly what it is.
That's a relief. But yeah, I mean, it is a hot topic. How do I get clients? How do I get clients? um, Keep working on improving your skill set. Share what you do publicly wherever you feel like you want to be, and wherever whoever you think your clients are, might be hanging out, and enjoy the process. I think that's another thing that we haven't really talked about, but I think you clearly you love doing the work you do, and you love educating people about the work that you do, and as a result, I I mean, no doubt that you're insanely busy because it's quite infectious, and I'm sure people find you very naturally because you're talking about something that is very personal to you and that other people really resonate with as a result. So I think that's important. Fungi, are you ready for your final question?
Yes, I am.
What is your next failure going to be?
Ah, interesting. Very interesting. Hmm. I don't even know how people typically answer this question, Jack. I'm hoping that I don't
To be
fail.
honest,
Was that too ambitious?
tip. Okay, great answer. That's the end of the episode, guys. No, I'm joking. I think typically people answer this question with surprise, a big pause, and then they kind of give a little philosophical ramble and then actually say what the next failure is going to be.
Okay. Well, I am going to be highly ambitious and say that I hope that I do not fail. I hold myself to a very high standard, so I want to make sure that whatever it is that I do, um, it may not be something that is a massive hit with everyone else, but for as long as it's a massive hit with me, then I know that I haven't failed at it.
Hey, killer answer there. Well, I won't have you back on the podcast then because you'll have no failures to talk about.
No,
Normally, I
please
say
do
to
invite me
guests, I'd
back.
love to have you. I'd love to have you back on the podcast to talk about those next failures, but you kind of killed my mojo there. I mean, I can't say that now.
I'm sorry, but I mean, still, please invite me back because I feel like we're friends now, so we can always just have a chat about something else.
But no failure fungi. Okay, fine. Well, we'll talk about other things. We'll talk about how you're crushing it in the Webflow space. But honestly, you've been an amazing guest. You've shared loads of nuggets with people that are listening. And I honestly think there's a lot of actionable takeaways from this episode. So thank you for coming on Webflow.
And thank you so much for having me. It's been super fun chatting with you.
Awesome. Glad you enjoyed it. If anyone wants to message you about this episode or anything, where should they find you?
So they can find me on Twitter and Instagram, which are my most active platforms. And I'm sure you'll put the links to that somewhere, maybe.
I will. But if anyone's
Okay.
looking right now, it's at FUNGI_DUBE.
That's the one.
That's the one. That's the one. Go give her a follow. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Appreciate you.